afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and we continue Global HR Forum 2014 this afternoon. And this is Junyoung Kim, President of Sungkyunkwan University and the President of Korean Council of Higher Education, moderator of this session. This is plenary session 2, actually President session, to invite 4 worldly known prestigious universities present from Boston University, from University of Minnesota, from Keio University, and from University of Edinburgh. The theme of this plenary session 2 is New Paradigm for Future Universities, in which we expect inspiring and challenging presentations and discussions for future university. I'd like to introduce the first keynote speaker, President Robert Brown from Boston University. He is a prominent scholar in the field of chemical engineering and elected to the National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Sciences in the United States. Okay, I'd like to ask a presentation for Dr. Brown.
Thank you. It is a privilege to speak at the Global HR Forum. And as you will tell from the style of my presentation, I am a teacher at heart, so there'll be some knowledge that will be of a historical consequence. When you look today at the interconnected world we live in by the internet, it is easy to project that physical institutions will disappear and be replaced by virtual organizations and online communities. The goal of my presentation is to paint a very different picture of the role of great research universities in the 21st century, a view where their physical presence is not only critical to the education and research that they carry out, but one where they are the nucleus of innovation and creativity for the cities where they are located and the countries that support them. In this context, in the context of human resources, they are now and will continue to be what I would term the epicenter of the competition for the most talented and most creative members of our society. My view is founded on the concept of a modern research university, a concept that grew out of the United States at the end of World War II. The role of science and technology in bringing the war to a close is well documented in the stories of technologies such as radar and the atomic bomb. The realization that university scientists played major roles in these developments led then-President Roosevelt to commission a report titled Science, the Endless Frontier, chaired by a famous scientist by the name of Vannevar Bush from MIT. The report advocated the investment in basic research, which was defined as research performed without thought of practical ends, and successfully launched the National Science Foundation in the United States and the system of peer-reviewed funding that spread to our other federal agencies. This system of federally supported peer-reviewed research led by university faculty and their graduate students is the bedrock of the quality-based funding system in the United States and the supply chain for the human capital in research and development that fuels the American economy. American research universities, both publicly supported by states and private universities, were born from this support infrastructure, which increased because of Sputnik and the Cold War. For all the problems of the educational system in the United States, and we could discuss them at length, the system of research universities is one of the country's greatest assets and is the envy of many people in the world. Now, the story of the American Research University is beautifully told in a book by Jonathan Cole, which I show here on this slide, which uses the statistics of Nobel Prizes awarded between Europeans and Americans as a marker of the impact of this innovation. And let me give you a few numbers. Between the inception of the Nobel Prizes in 1901 and 1950, Europeans won 79% of all the prizes in the sciences, compared to 18% by Americans. From 1951, 6 years after the Bush report, until 2003, Americans won 56% of the prizes, compared to 37% by Europeans. Equally as important today, the federal government's support of research through universities is critical to the nation's economic future. The report of the National Research Council in the United States, titled Rising Above the Gathering Storm, reported that in 2008, 43% of the $68 billion of research, both basic and applied, funded by the federal government, was performed in research universities. Why was the United States so successful at this? I think there are three attributes that are critical, which I wanted to talk about in this HR forum. First is a competitive funding scheme. Competitive funding for research in a system of research universities large enough to distinguish quality in each discipline. The second is what I would call faculty empowerment. Empowering especially our young faculty members and treating them as true equals in the academic research enterprise while judging them critically through the promotion and tenure systems, thereby retaining only the very best talent on our faculties for the long term. The importance of this attribute of the American system cannot be overestimated, and for decades was a major attraction for young scientists and engineers from around the world to come to American universities. The third attribute, which is a big topic of this meeting, is what I would call the human capital market globally. The market for the brightest graduate students and most productive faculty members, created by the size of the American research university system, dominated the world for 50 years. That dominance is beginning to wane with the creation of many, many high-quality universities around the world that are competing for that same talent. Although initially funded by federal support, there was based on the notion of that the nation must invest in research, basic research. Research universities have become a major component of the innovation that feeds the American economy, and have spawned local innovation ecosystems that are populated by startup companies, incubators, and venture capitalists. How did this coupling between research universities and economic development occur? It was not imagined by the report by Vannevar Bush. In fact, in his report, he took a very negative view of applied research and advocated forcefully that the government should support only pure research above all else. This led to what I would call the linear system or linear model for technology translation. Here you have basic research, followed by applied research, followed by development, and finally commercialization. Here, basic research was far removed from the commercial reality. In fact, the importance of intellectual property in the discussion of academic research was not formally addressed until the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980, which finally gave the intellectual property to the universities as the grantees of the federal research. Again, the linear model was at work. The concept was a university makes a discovery, files a disclosure and a patent, and then markets this discovery to the private sector in the hope of finding an interested party. 3 decades after the Bayh-Dole Act, the ecosystem of research universities has evolved very differently. The focus of impact-driven research, which has become the norm today, is not new. There's a wonderful account of this in a book by Donald Stokes called Pasteur's Quadrant, Basic Science and Technology Innovation. The name of Stokes' book follows from the diagram shown here, which separates qualitatively 2 elements: fundamental contribution to science and societal impact. Stokes' view was that Pasteur's quadrant, the quadrant in the upper right, named for the father of microbiology, is populated by fundamental innovation that's driven by societal demand, not by the quest simply to push the frontiers of science. There are numerous examples of critical work in Pasteur's quadrant. The creation of the internet, the invention of the global positioning system, GPS, are both relatively recent technologies that owe their existence to military-inspired research funding in the 70s and 80s. There are many other examples. From one frame of reference, the system was primed in the US from the beginning to make the leap from basic science to use-inspired research. It was primed both intellectually and financially. The key is that American research faculty members are really entrepreneurs. They decide what research directions to pursue in their laboratories and direct their groups of graduate students and postdocs toward goals that they set. Their research is financed in large part by competitively awarded federal research funds, with some support from the private sector. What happened in the United States in the 90s is there was a leap into Pasteur's quadrant funded and focused on application-inspired research. And that jump was not large for the faculty. Only the incentives of research funding had to be aligned to make this happen. Today, research universities are at the center of the innovation ecosystem that benefits their cities and the countries that support them. This cartoon is a poor way of showing what the components of this environment. Besides the research ideas developed in the laboratories and offices of the universities, the most important product in these institutions is the highly educated and motivated undergraduate and graduate students who populate the large and small companies, many of which continue to interact with the university. What is most interesting today is that the role of the startup company the prominence of the role of the startup company formed by these graduates and by their faculty members. Startup companies are small, flexible, fast-moving, and fragile. They live in an infrastructure of innovation in incubators with venture capitalists and support services, finance and legal services, all geared to help them be successful. Success of a startup company can take the form of growth to being a successful initial public offering or an IPO, or the sale to a larger company. This last outcome leads to intense involvement in that diagram of multinational companies, MNCs, who are part of the ecosystem, sitting in the ecosystem, hiring graduates, but also looking at where startup companies fit within their strategies of their own companies. Now, I must take an opportunity, use the opportunity to advertise what I believe is the most intense innovative ecosystem in the world, and that's along the Charles River in Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts. To give you a bit of context, within a radius of 3 miles, there are 3 major research universities: Harvard University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Boston University, and their major teaching hospitals. Each of these institutions is a member of the Association of American Universities, the AAU, which includes the 60 most research-intensive universities in the United States. And together, these 3 institutions account for over $2 billion annually of federally supported research. Boston University is the youngest of these research universities, making the transition from a regional university focused on undergraduate and graduate professional education to a research university only in the last several decades. We missed the first 30 years of the research university paradigm. You can see that very clearly if you look at this research support from the federal government of Boston University, shown back to 1971. And you see that in 1971, the entire support we gleaned from the federal government was $13 million a year. And in the latest year, it was over $350 million. When you add in the research support of our major medical school faculty at our major teaching hospitals, we're over $500 million a year of research support. What is especially interesting about Boston University, as well as Harvard and MIT, is that we are all private universities, operated as not-for-profit corporations by a board of trustees who, with the senior leadership, shape the path of the university. Like any corporation, we are accountable for our budget and our balance sheet, while focusing on our missions of higher education and research in the public good. Today, Boston University has a annual budget of about $2.1 billion, not including clinical medical operations, with about 60% of that coming from tuition and fees paid by our students. Our 33,000 students are divided almost equally between undergraduate and graduate students. We're committed to the access to the university, and we give over $250 million a year of financial aid, with over 80% of it for undergraduates being given on a financial need basis. This brings me to my final point, and it's the creation of the innovative ecosystem around major research universities is no longer an American phenomenon. We all know that in this room. Innovation hubs anchored by major research universities are increasingly becoming the focus of all major economies as a strategy for enhancing innovation and economic prosperity. All one needs to do is look at the rankings or league tables of your favorite choice to see these. This is the league table of the Times of London ranking of the best universities in the world. The top 75 universities are listed here. There is nothing sacred about this ranking of universities worldwide, but the same case could be made from any league table. The United States still has the most institutions on the list, especially in the top 25. This has been true since the beginning of these rankings and is no doubt a result of our early investments in research universities. How dominant is the research university model in terms of the perception of quality? All of the American universities in this table are all members of the AAU and are research universities. What is important to glean from this table is that similar ecosystems are being created around the world, from Cambridge and Edinburgh and London, England, and I can still say England, I guess, or at least UK, I should say, to Singapore and Seoul. In each environment, the same three ingredients are necessary: stable and predictable funding from government for peer-reviewed competitive research, a system of empowerment for your faculty, especially your junior faculty, so that you can attract and retain truly excellent people, and access to a large pool of talent of faculty, students, and staff to make up the human resource ecosystem. Governments are putting in place the funding for these systems, and cities are welcoming these research universities with dramatic growth in their innovation ecosystem as a result, and this is especially happening in Asia. The growing investments in these centers of excellence will fuel what will be a worldwide competition for faculty and students. The stakes will be very high as more of our innovation and economic benefit is generated by a very small number of very talented researchers and entrepreneurs in these institutions. Thank you. Take questions?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Please have your seat. Thank you very much, Ralph Brown, President of Boston University. We have a very impressive presentation from you about innovation ecosystem, especially in the side of research university ecosystem. Thank you very much. And the second keynote speaker is Eric Keller, President of University of Minnesota. Also, he's a prominent scholar in the field of chemical engineering and a member of American Academy of Art and Sciences 2014, and also member National Academy of Engineering 2010. Okay, Keller, please present.
Thank you, President Kim. It is a real pleasure to be here in Seoul and to follow my friend Bob Brown to the microphone. I'll start by turning today's topic, New Paradigms for Future Universities, on its head a little bit, because to me, the new paradigms for future universities already live on the foundations and the legacies of our current institutions, many of whom are quite old. In my case, the future at the University of Minnesota will certainly remain true to our 163 years of principles and mission. And to me, the basics of higher education in the years to come can be seen in the elements of the thoughtful and progressive research university of today. We at the University of Minnesota are increasingly global, entrepreneurial, committed to partnerships with industry and government, seeking new ways to develop and protect intellectual property, willing to test new methods of pedagogy, and devoted to solving the world's most pressing grand challenges. And so I think some might say that's what a paradigm for future universities look like. And the University of Minnesota is not unique in that perspective. Here's a brief outline of what I'd like to talk about today. Grand challenges, curiosity, new approaches to partnerships with our state government, which around the world may be with city governments or provincial governments, new approaches to intellectual property and its management, the value of a place-based education, internationalism, and I'll finish with a tiny bit of a cute story about the history of the University of Minnesota and Korea. I'll begin with some perspectives on my university, and again, these are meant to be an example of others around the country. I'm the president of a university that has about 60,000 students on 5 campuses across a state in the United States that comprises a surface area 3 times the size of the Republic of Korea. We produce most of the physicians, lawyers, scientists, engineers, and business and civic leaders for the 21st most populous state in the United States, and we are the 9th largest public research university in the United States. Our university's new strategic plan, and my vision, sees the role of the forward-looking global research university being to confront and solve the most serious and intractable grand challenges in the world. And I think we all know those include poverty, social inequity, religious intolerance, world hunger, epidemics of disease, food and food safety, the future of water, and perhaps even war and peace. Globally directed research universities are among the few organizations that have the historic mission and the public charge to confront such challenges. Combine that mission with the intellectual freedom and curiosity that's promoted in the United States to attack such problems from every angle, and we are uniquely equipped to lead and to move our respective nations forward. At its core, that intellectual freedom and curiosity must drive the credible and respected university of today and especially of tomorrow. We have the responsibility to nurture the curiosity that best prepares our students in an interdisciplinary way to solve these challenges facing us. Now, we have to continue our traditional role of preparing students for jobs, but research universities do far more than produce the workforce for today. They prepare the talent force for tomorrow and the people who will invent the day after tomorrow. We must produce the people who are grand challengers of the future, and they must be committed to innovation. And that's why, although we tend to focus on the natural sciences and technology when discussing the future of higher education, we cannot and must not disregard the power of the liberal arts and humanities. Those nurture skills and knowledge around language and critical thinking, communications and history. They embrace the arts and culture, and they guide understanding of the psychology of people and the sociology of communities. So the new paradigm of the future universities can't and should not allow for a world of one-track minds. We want to develop problem solvers with young and developing minds that thoughtfully question the status quo and seek to move their communities and the world forward. Now, I am sure now and in the future, our engineers will build plenty of robots. But we don't need to educate people to be robots. Don Randall, former president of the University of Chicago, said it best in my view, and I quote, "The ultimate foundation of any society ought to be the human imagination, honed to the greatest degree and in the company of its faithful companion, curiosity." Curiosity is the driver of creative work in all fields. It drives innovation in all directions, and it's the business we're in higher education. So let me talk a bit now about what we do to enable this curiosity in a few areas. And I'm going to start with our research efforts. Our effort here is framed by the principle of working for the common and public good. The University of Minnesota is a public university supported by the people of the state of Minnesota and meant to deliver outcomes for them. But before any work can be done, it needs to be funded. And we're pretty typical among U.S. universities at which research is principally funded in four main ways, and you've heard some of that from Bob Brown. The largest is by the federal government through the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, or other agencies. And these funds are usually awarded in response to calls for proposals that are peer-reviewed. And this peer-reviewed process, which is rigorous and confidential, means that funds are awarded on the merit of the idea, not by seniority or by benefit of political connections. A second method is by grants or contracts from industry. A third way is by gifts or philanthropy from companies, foundations, or individuals. And finally, in some cases, state governments fund research and policy studies, mainly at state-supported universities like ours. And all of this funding allows for the creation of new knowledge, discoveries, and patents. Let me take just a minute to highlight how the University of Minnesota recently partnered with our state government to promote research in four areas critical to state businesses and our citizens. We call it MnDrive, Minnesota Discovery, Research, and Innovation Economy, and we have focused our university-wide research on four areas: food production, safety, and protection; robotics as it applies to advanced manufacturing; water quality as it pertains to industry and mining; and neuromodulation, which relates to the state's world-renowned medical device industry. These are important areas. 20% of our state's economy is tied to food. Neuroscience and brain conditions, research in those areas ties to our medical device industry in Minnesota, which is amongst the world's largest. And water quality research is natural in a state with more than 10,000 lakes, and that's located on the banks of Lake Superior, one of North America's Great Lakes. We have gathered substantial government support for this focused, innovative approach. But what's next? What's the next step from the lab to the marketplace to the homes, hospitals, factories, and highways of the world? Now, as most of you know, research in science, medicine, or applied science and engineering now almost always requires an interdisciplinary understanding of the world. And one element of that interdisciplinary work is work between higher education institutions and businesses, both those already existing and those we hope to create and grow ourselves. It is those businesses, after all, that translates our findings into products and outcomes for the good of humans, and that role will be essential for universities of the future. One area that must change for higher education is the way we approach, form, and leverage partnerships in our research in the birth of our intellectual property. And the first example of this is how we manage and nurture our inventors and their startup companies to move technology forward. And again, I'll use the University of Minnesota as an example. In the past fiscal year, we launched a record 15 startups companies. We have a capital venture center to help startups, and we raised over $110 million from outside sources over the past 7 years. And in that 7-year period, we've launched 74 startup companies. More than 80% of them are still active, which is a remarkable success rate. This investment program is also focused and strategic, like the MnDrive program I described earlier. It's domain-specific, and we bring in advisory boards of experts to help us seed fund the most disruptive and potentially powerful University of Minnesota technologies. In another new approach to how we operate as a university, we at Minnesota have worked hard to lower the barriers for working with industrial partners, with researchers from already established companies. For one, we created incentives to help faculty work more easily with industry. We've amended our tenure code to allow recognition of success in technology transfer. We've created what we call entrepreneurial leaves, which allows faculty members to temporarily leave their teaching positions while retaining a spot on the faculty to explore their discoveries in the private sector. But I think the most important barriers we've broached are those to do with developing intellectual property, and let me talk to you a bit more about that. It's a new approach that I think is a requirement for the university of the future, and it sheds higher education's natural aversion to risk, and I think it makes us more entrepreneurial. We've established what we call the Minnesota Innovation Partnerships, or MIN-IP, and it's a new approach to how we handle intellectual property arising from research funded by business. It's a nation-leading approach, and it's designed simply to eliminate red tape and protracted negotiations over intellectual property rights, and it in the end promotes closer and more beneficial relationships with our business partner. We listened to industry and we listened to our faculty, and this was driven by an understanding that the value of strategic partnerships for our faculty, our communities, and most importantly our students outweighs potential short-term licensing income. So here's what industry told us. Make it easier to do business with the university. Eliminate protracted negotiations. Be transparent. Tell us up front what we owe, both in terms of sponsored research and license agreement. Give us exclusive rights to IP we fund through sponsored research, because we don't want our competitors to have access to the research that we funded. Make it easier to evaluate and license IP, and that's what we've done. Now, I don't know about your university or company, but I know as an inventor and a chemical engineer from my own experience when it comes to intellectual property, negotiations went around and around about who might own intellectual property that might come out of the process of discovery, that might make its way into a product, that might go for sale, that might be purchased from by somebody, and that might turn a profit. That's a lot of mights in a sentence. We decided that worrying about all of those potentials is not worth the effort, and our history shows that to be true. Because of those long negotiations, we at the university often wound up owning 100% of nothing because the partner walked away. So we listened and we changed the model. MIN-IP allows a for-profit entity to pay a 10% upfront charge on the sponsored research agreement, which provides them exclusive rights to the resulting inventions. It's a win-win for the U and its business partners, and it creates a win for customers, patients, and manufacturers. It creates a true and lasting partnership that extends well beyond a single research project. It becomes an opportunity for students to work as interns with our partners. It allows scientists from industry to come and work at the U. It establishes a relationship to lead to, among other things, philanthropy, and it fundamentally changes the way industries and universities interact. So let me turn to teaching in the classroom and what we do and how we'll do it in the future. We're aligning our teaching with our curiosity-driven, multi-interdisciplinary approach. We're in the process of now developing what we call a Grand Challenges curriculum, which will allow students to take courses across our university in focused units that address world problems, be they world hunger, climate change, or social inequality. Students will still require expertise in a curriculum and a discipline, but across those disciplines will be these Grand Challenges courses. I, as others, agree that place-based teaching is not going to go away, but we are committed to new models of pedagogy, to so-called flipped classrooms, where a lecture is watched online and old-fashioned homework, solving problems, talking about readings, is work done in the classroom. Our students are more engaged and their communication skills are enhanced, and I like to think their curiosity is nurtured. Their ability to solve problems and look at challenges from every angle improves. And to aid in this, we've built facilities specifically designed for active learning, with students working in groups and professors roaming around as coaches and mentors, not merely lecturers. We, as many other universities, have engaged in some massively open online classes, or MOOCs, but we do not see them as the complete future of higher education. Data so far suggests limited success for MOOCs, particularly when it comes to completion rates by students. They certainly play a role in providing as-needed information when it's needed, but I don't think it will replace place-based education. The paradigm for future universities, I believe, will embrace the value and individuality of place-based learning. In the United States, 18-year-olds leaving home to explore the next phases of their lives seems to me to be a good thing for the young people, and from my experience, especially for their parents. At the same time, place-based learning can leverage the uniqueness of a campus. For ours, for example, in the 16th largest metropolitan area in the U.S., along one of the world's great rivers, and at the home of the headquarters of 19 Fortune 500 companies. Those are experiences you cannot get online. Nor can students engage with their communities, learn from diverse cultures, or work to solve local problems behind a screen or watching a video. So I do believe powerful and relevant universities of the future must learn to take advantage of their unique locations. Finally, and I'll conclude with this, a successful and flourishing university of the future must promote and engage in a global perspective. And the top universities in the world are already on that path. Among all U.S. universities, the University of Minnesota ranked third in sending our domestic students abroad, with more than 2,500 of our students studying abroad this year. We encourage international students to study on our campuses, and last year we welcomed more than 6,000 undergraduate and graduate students from over 140 nations to Minnesota. Our researchers have partnerships with about 100 other nations. So let me finish with this story that illustrates how that history informs the future. This story began 60 years ago and only about 15 kilometers away from here at Seoul National University. It's a story about how the University of Minnesota's relationship with SNU informs the constancy of higher education and tells us about the fundamental values of global higher education and how they live on today. In the aftermath of the Korean War, from 1954 to 1962, the University of Minnesota worked with SNU through a grant administered by the U.S. Agency for International Development. As our Korean friends know, those years were a time of growth and expansion in this nation, and the University of Minnesota was fortunate to be selected as a primary partner in the rebuilding and modernization of SNU. The initial program targeted the fields of agriculture, engineering, and medicine, and later expanded. More than 200 Korean scholars studied at Minnesota during that period for 1 to 3 years, and more than 50 faculty members from Minnesota were involved in the rebuilding of SNU. More than 60 Korean students earned masters and 14 earned PhDs in Minnesota during that period. But really, here is the best part. We understand that SNU now has a similar relationship with the National University of Laos to help Laos develop its premier university, and it's modeled after SNU's Minnesota project. So this linking of expertise and training really exemplifies all that international education is about. It's about what great universities do today, did before, and I believe will continue to do in the future. The global university and its role in solving problems and extending an international hand of friendship and solutions is really nothing new. Still, there are always new problems and new ways to teach and learn. Innovation, risk-taking, new ways to partner, tackling grand challenges, looking outward and globally, and using knowledge for the common good. It's what we at universities do, and that's what we will continue to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, President Keller's presentation on University of Minnesota Drive and also University of Minnesota Innovation Property and also place-based innovative pedagogy. Very impressive programs introduced vividly now. Thank you very much. And third keynote speaker is Atsushi Seike, president of Keio University, and also prominent scholar in labor economics, and now president of the Japanese Association of Private Universities and Colleges. Please, Seike.
Thank you very much, President Kim, for your kind introduction. It is my great pleasure and honor to be able to participate in this very prestigious forum. I am very grateful to be given this opportunity. Well, as economy and society become increasingly more advanced, universities are expected to produce more sophisticated research results and more talented graduates. Universities need to contribute to society on a wider scale and a deeper level by strengthening collaboration with industry and government. And in this time of globalization, the contribution of universities should also be on a global scale. Regarding research, the roles are essentially divided so that universities provide a wealth of basic research, industry develops applied research, and the government supports universities and the industry. The call for support, published by the Global University Leaders Forum at the World Economic Forum in January 2012, clearly pointed out the importance of the role of universities in providing basic research. Please allow me to quote from it very briefly. Today's applied research comes from yesterday's fundamental discoveries. As former president of the United Kingdom's Royal Society, Sir George Porter famously said, there are two types of research, applied and not yet applied. So one very important interpretational role of universities concerning research is to connect basic research to applied research or to businesses that can make ventures from the applied research. A necessary condition of translating or basic research into something used outside of the university is, of course, that we continuously produce interesting results in our basic research. First, we should encourage our faculty members and students to continue on what they are interested in, which often leads to pioneering and even game-changing basic research without them having to worry about money. In this, we always ask government and business communities for their generous support. And another thing that we have to do is to attract attention from outside the university, including the business community, government, or even the public as a whole. In this, we have to use all kinds of networks we have developed, including our alumni association. For example, if a company is interested in the application of the basic research, they may donate research funds. And then, if it really believes in the potential of the venture based on the research, it may invest in the venture. In order to make all this possible, I wish to request the government's further support for basic research at universities. Regarding education, it is important to note that the work abilities required in industries are determined by the technology and the market conditions. And so, if the technological and market structure change, the necessary work abilities have to be redefined. In particular, in times of great changes like this, it is extremely important to possess the ability to understand for oneself new situations and solve any problems based on one's own understanding. The ability to think for oneself is the ability to think systematically. It goes without saying that this is none other than the academic way of thinking, namely the process of identifying a problem, constructing a hypothesis explaining why that problem has occurred, and testing the hypothesis to reach a conclusion. So it will continue to become increasingly more important for universities to allow students to learn a wide range of fields of academia and carry out deeply proven research in order to improve their ability to think for themselves. Companies can improve the ability of their employees who possess the ability to think for themselves by providing providing training on the job and allowing them to perfect the best possible working skills as they experience different technologies and markets. In fact, on-the-job training provided by Japanese companies to their employees contributes significantly to Japan's top ranking among OECD countries in terms of adult competencies. Now, let me introduce some practical examples from Keio University that demonstrate my suggestions on collaboration among government, industry, and universities. Firstly, on research, Keio University has an Institute for Advanced Biosciences in Tsuruoka City in Yamagata Prefecture. It's a northern part of Japan. The institute receives a total of 700 million yen each year in financial support from the Yamagata Prefecture and the Tsuruoka City. The research by institute that was made possible due to this governmental support led to the creation of 2 new venture companies. They are ventures named Human Metabolome Technologies, a company which conducts metabolome analysis, and Spiber, which has developed synthetic spider silk fiber. The case of human metabolome, the Human Metabolome Technologies has successfully gone public and is the only company in Tsuruoka City, the small city in a rural area, to be listed on the stock market. In the case of Spiber, an automobile parts company is not only investing in the venture financially, but is also providing know-how regarding manufacturing and marketing. So this case shows you that the local governments provide financial support, the university makes a pioneering discovery, and industry provides a financial support and know-how allowing for this creation of new venture. In the field of education, Keio University received funding from the Japanese government to establish programs for leading graduate school. They are programs for PhD level students, which require them to study entirely in English. And in this program, each graduate student is assigned a mentor from the business community. And these mentors give the students guidance and support them in making a career decision and finding placements. Now, let me turn to the topics regarding so-called globalization of university activities. On one hand, globalization leads to increased competition among universities worldwide in terms of recruiting good students and faculties. On the other hand, as international interdependency of economy and society deepen more and more, there are an increasing number of problems which we have to cope with together internationally. So, collaboration and the cooperation of a university community becomes more important as well. And of course, in the globalized world, people need to work and live with those who speak different languages and come from different cultural backgrounds. So it becomes increasingly important for universities to foster young people who have the ability to understand the foreign language and the different culture. We would like to provide our students with more opportunities in which they can be exposed to international circumstances. In order to do this, it is essential for us to increase the number of students who come from overseas and the number of our students who go to study abroad. In this respect, it is extremely important for us to have a good partners in the world university community. And here, let me introduce a very good example of university partnership between Korean and Japanese universities. As you may know, we, Keio University and Yonsei University, have developed a collaborative relationship over the decades. This is also the case for Waseda University in Japan and Koryo University in Korea. And these top 5 universities, private universities in Japan and Korea have had an annual conference called the Millennium Forum for the last 12 years, in which presidents, faculty members, and the students have had a very meaningful interactive activities. And I would like to note that from this year, the Lotte Group started providing its very generous support for the forum, which we deeply appreciate. Furthermore, these very cordial bilateral relations are now expanding the multilateral ones. For example, again, with Keio University, Yonsei University, and the University of Hong Kong have developed a pretty successful joint exchange program called Three Campus Program, in which students of 3 universities study together at each of the 3 campuses across one academic year. This program has been receiving much attention beyond East Asia, and recently King's College London from the United Kingdom and Cornell University and Princeton University from the United States have just joined us. And in terms of globalization, I would also like to note that recently, we Keio University launched a new project for globalization to promote the reach of our contribution on a global scale. As you know, so-called the globalization of campuses is a common agenda among the university community today. On the other hand, each university, particularly private universities like ours, has their own funding principles. So we have to move forward with our globalization efforts through our own funding principles, which in Keio's case means the principles of our founder, Yukichi Fukuzawa, who emphasized the importance of science. Indeed, the Japanese government called for application for its newly created Top Global University project. We applied and wrote a proposal to globalize our campuses titled Enhancing Sustainability of Global Society Through Jitsugaku, which to Fukuzawa meant science. And very fortunately, we have been awarded a Top Global University project grant. Fukuzawa established Keio to foster young people who could solve the problems they faced at that time of upheaval after the Meiji Restoration in mid-19th century Japan through Jitsugaku or science. Of course, the problems we face today are different from those in Fukuzawa's days, and in our application for the Top Global University project, we sort of focused on 3 basic problems we have to cope with today. They are an aging population, by which I mean the increasing proportion of older people, increasing natural and man-made risks like global warming or regional conflicts, and the increasing need for creativity for sustainable growth. In order to cope with these problems, we created 3 clusters, research and educational clusters, namely the cluster of longevity, in which we conduct research and education to make a sustainable aging society, the cluster of security, in which we conduct research and education to make a safer society, the cluster of creativity, in which we conduct research and education to promote a more creative society. If we can find solutions to cope with these problems, it will have many valuable policy implications for other countries which are facing similar problems. Fortunately, we have many high-caliber faculties and students who are able to undertake this type of research and education. In each of these clusters, we will conduct advanced research and applying it to solve a problem through interdisciplinary approach, and then using feedback from the result to further deepen basic research. And by using these clusters as a platform of system reform, we will introduce more aggressive practice in our research and educational system and in our human resource management system. By promoting these reforms, we can improve our research activities, quality of education, and as a result, our international competencies. In closing, let me quote Yukichi Fukuzawa, the founder of Keio University. Fukuzawa urged that just as a guardian goose is, the big bird with a long neck, the guardian goose cranes its neck to watch for danger, while the rest of the flock intently pecks at their food. Scholars must calmly analyze the developments of the present and consider what needs to be done for the future. Collaborating with industry and the government, we, as a university, believe that our fundamental role is to carry out basic research that will be of use to the world in the future, and to foster young people who can think for themselves and will contribute to the global society, and will do so on a global scale with our partner institutions abroad towards a better future for global society. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Seike, President of Keio University, and a very impressive presentation. Especially, he put on emphasis on cooperation with the industry and the government with university, and also he introduced very interesting cases about the international cooperation between universities. And the final keynote speaker is Timothy O'Shea, Principal and Vice-Chancellor, University of Edinburgh. Please.
I stand here at this important conference with a tremendous amount of pride. Pride because there are some very distinguished University of Edinburgh alumni in the audience. Pride because some very important Korean universities are represented here by their presidents who we have very close relationships with. And pride because the University of Edinburgh has had a role in educating the leadership of Korea, particularly your second president, Yoon Pa-sun. And for us, this is very, very important indeed. I will echo some of the remarks made by the other three presidents in their excellent presentations, but probably spend a little bit more on technology. For me, in terms of the world context for universities, the single biggest, most important change, which I will spend a certain amount of time on, is digital development. And although I'm a computer scientist myself, I've got my doctorate in machine learning, and I chaired the government body in the United Kingdom that looked after all our computing and networks. Even with that background, I'm surprised at the speed of digital development recently and the likely developments in the next 10 years. I will emphasize globalization, and this is not new for universities. My university is 430 years old, and when it was founded, it took its curriculum from the University of Paris. It was particularly then inspired by the University of Leiden in Holland, which it took for its model for its medical school. By the 18th century, we had the most famous medical school in the world at that time, and that meant that we were very internationalized. So, for example, 250 years ago, 10% of the students at the University of Edinburgh came from the United States, mostly to study medicine, but also to study engineering. And at that period, we had people, one of the regular visitors to the university was Benjamin Franklin from the United States, another was Voltaire from France. So 250 years ago, an internationalized community. I'll talk about academic autonomy, which I see as very important for the success of universities, and I'll talk about fierce competition. We had one of these league tables shown recently. For the University of Edinburgh, these World League tables have been like Christmas. There is no World League table in which we're not in the top 50. The one we like the most, QS, which is not the one that ranks us the most highly, but QS ranks us as 17th in the world. It's the one that uses the most data. The Russian one actually ranks us higher. But there is fierce competition. There are 40,000 entities in the world that call themselves universities. If we take a stricter definition, 20,000 of those offer degrees at the doctoral level. So 20,000 universities offering doctoral degrees. Very many of them, if you read in their mission statement, their mission is to be in the world top 200 or the world top 100. Very difficult for very many of 20,000 to be in the world top 100. So the competition has got hotter and hotter. And then multiple partnerships. As we address some of these challenging world issues which have already been described, like the environment, like healthy aging, like world peace, then we work in multiple partnerships. So the issues then, I'll talk about technology, also about, now I'll just talk a little bit about research massification. That is one of the drivers for partnership. At the University of Edinburgh, we are very proud of our Peter Higgs. 40 years ago, he made predictions that would change our understanding of the structure of matter, and he predicted a particular particle. And recently, the most expensive experiment in the history of the world, most scientific experiment, was carried out in CERN, led by European scientists, but because the facilities in the United States and in Japan found that they couldn't deal with an experiment of this size, they also became involved in the European experiment. And this experiment involved 10,000 physicists drawn from every country in the world that has a serious presence in experimental or theoretical physics. And it was successful, and within Europe it has been very positive in terms of the thinking of the civil servants who support science. But it is not just in the physical sciences that we see research massification. The University of Edinburgh is leading a bid in competition with other bids in Europe. The European Union is going to have a program of research into healthy aging. So we have submitted a single bid, which we know is financially realistic, for a project involving 5 major European partners over 8 years that will cost 300 million euros. So about 350, well, and the current exchange rate, we're getting even more. But so about 350 million US dollars. So this is a very big project, which will involve medical scientists, social scientists, and other scientists. One of the competitive projects may be funded rather than us, but it shows the European Union saying, if we are addressing healthy aging, this is one big project, highly interdisciplinary, highly multidisciplinary, and it will involve considerable resource. So it isn't just in the experimental sciences. We're seeing teaching change a lot as a consequence of technology, and I'll talk about how courses are diversifying, delivery of teaching, change and support of learning. All the major research universities now are also concerned with entrepreneurial education. I've mentioned institutional stratification, but this will continue with the ease of Googling, with the ease of getting comparative data. When I am visited by an ambassador, I know that the ambassador knows exactly how the university is rated, and they know how we're rated in different subjects. Whenever I interview a professor that we are trying to recruit, they come in the door knowing how physics or astronomy or anthropology appears on the different league tables. So tremendous stratification. An issue is demand. If you look at the statistics, it is very clear that the demand for higher education worldwide is going to go up. If you just take China and India, which represent a third of the world, we see a growing middle class with a tremendous demand for higher education, with no short-term opportunity of that being met in those countries. So we see worldwide demand for higher education going up. And we also see funding, particularly research funding in different jurisdictions. We just heard about the visionary and strategic initiative in Japan, but there have been similar initiatives in research funding recently in Germany, in France, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, and in the People's Republic of China. So very serious. And then, as I said, I'll finish on institutional autonomy. Technology trends. Moore's law. Moore was the person who gave us the technology to put a computer on a chip. Moore's law tells us to predict a doubling of power every 18 months, and you can measure it how you like, as processor power, available memory. We know that Moore's law is good for at least another 10 years. That tells us that computers will become even more cheaper, even more powerful. So there's a big driver there. Does anybody know Metcalfe's law? Metcalfe's law is a very interesting one. It's a pair to Moore's law. As Moore was the person who put the computer on a chip, Metcalfe was involved in packet switching. The internet has already been mentioned. The internet and the Ethernet, they depend on communicating in packets. Bob Metcalfe was key there. And Metcalfe noticed that people were doing crazy things. They were attaching things like complicated documents or pictures or small bits of film to their email messages. And Bob Metcalfe predicted that the internet would collapse in about 2001. The internet did not collapse. And the reason the internet did not collapse is that a version of Moore's law applies to the bandwidth on the internet. So happily, Metcalfe's law is false. So we will see people using more and more powerful computers to send more and more complex messages. And then Bayes' law is absolutely critical. Bayes' law allows us to reason with large amounts of data. Bayes' law was what was used to establish the statistical relationship between smoking tobacco and cancer, lung cancer. Wherever there is large data, Bayes' law will apply, and this means that more and more research findings will be discovered as the volume of data goes up. At Edinburgh, we are very proud of Thomas Bayes. We educated him. He was, interestingly, a clergyman. And we had a key role in Korea in the education of Protestant clergymen here. Bayes was an English clergyman that we educated who was interested in improving his performance in gambling. That was his objective. He would have been very happy here being next to a casino. And to improve his performance in gambling, he did some very sophisticated reasoning, which allows us to do conditional reasoning from large data. We see ubiquitous computing. All of you have got a computer in front of you. Some of you have got 2 or 3. A number of you are discreetly reading your emails or sending messages. Computing is ubiquitous. We see machine learning, my own area, being applied. If you watch your computer or your mobile phone carefully, you will notice that sometimes it knows things a bit too quickly. It offers you things to buy that you are interested in, but you have not said you want to buy. It recognizes your speech a bit faster than you would expect. Why is that? That is because the computer has got machine learning inside, and we will see more and more of that. And we will see the wisdom of crowds, the ability to get information from different people. A place where the wisdom of crowds has already had big scientific impact is in astronomy. There is a system called Galaxy Zoo, which comprises about 1 million amateur astronomers worldwide who use their computers to get astronomical data that has not yet been analyzed, who attempt their own analyses, who show it to other amateurs, and then when they think they've found something new, they show it to the professionals. And sometimes they have found brand new, important astronomical findings that the world's professional astronomers have not already not found. And so that will really change. It changes the access to research. And we will increasingly see more university undergraduates using the technology to do genuine research. And we will increasingly see more people who are not formally part of the university community. Courses will diversify. We will see more part-time courses, much more online. At the University of Edinburgh, we now have 60 online masters delivered worldwide. more free public courses, more professional doctorates related to particular professional specialities, more conversion courses, many more interdisciplinary and hybrid courses. I will give you the University of Edinburgh's most startling example of a successful online master's. A few months ago, I went with colleagues from surgery to visit Her Majesty the Queen, the Queen of England, who is also, as well as being the Queen of England, the Queen of Scotland too. And we went to see the Queen of England and the Queen of Scotland, who gave us a prize for an online master's which teaches worldwide advanced surgery. So perhaps that makes you a little nervous. The University of Edinburgh, we are very famous for medicine, but can we really teach advanced surgery? And I will give you online, and I'll give you 4 pieces of comfort. In order to study the course, you must already be a surgeon. In order to study the course, you must be in a hospital where you are already licensed to practice surgery. The third piece of comfort is, if you imagine what does a modern advanced surgeon do, well, they mostly sit in front of a screen and use a mouse, and they're controlling some sort of surgical robot. So practicing virtual surgery using a computer and a keyboard rather than using a knife is not crazy. And the fourth thing to give you comfort is we do this in partnership with the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, and we insist that these students come to us in Edinburgh for 2 weeks. So one of my predictions is that we won't see online necessarily entirely replace place-based, but we'll see very much more hybrid. So these students who have been studying advanced surgery with us remotely, then they leave Los Angeles or Shanghai or Seoul. They come to Edinburgh for 2 weeks. We check they really can do the advanced surgery. We examine them. And then the University of Edinburgh gives them a master's degree, and the Royal College of Surgeons gives them a certificate that says they can practice in a hospital. So a very solid course delivered almost entirely online, apart from 2 weeks, in a very complex speciality, advanced surgery. And then we see massive open online courses. The University of Edinburgh was the first non-US university to follow Stanford, MIT, Harvard, and Berkeley into this area. For us, it has been a tremendous success. On my campus in Edinburgh, we have 33,000 students coming from 140 countries. It's interesting, same number. With our MOOCs, we have reached 1 million learners in 204 different countries. And they have been quite different and very successful. We have had a MOOC on Introduction to Philosophy, 160,000 students. A MOOC on equine nutrition, what you feed horses, which has been, in these terms, modest, only 16,000 students, but has had the best completion and best retention of any MOOC. And we think that's because the students were all sincere. We think they nearly all had a horse, and they were very keen to learn exactly what to feed their horse. We have had a MOOC on understanding the Scottish independence referendum, which occurred during the referendum. And we had a MOOC which is extremely important for Scotland because this is an area in which we are appallingly bad. We have a MOOC on understanding football in an attempt to improve Scotland's understanding and performance in football, an area where Korea is obviously much more successful than we are. Course delivery, changing, small group, syncopated, using the technology for lifelong recall, dispersed small groups, as was mentioned in earlier presentations, a lot of focus on the design of learning spaces, partnership with the students, and random access. Support of learning, fast feedback, and this is one of the things technology gives you. We can give feedback now much faster, make it easier to self-assess, make it easier to have a learning portfolio. So for a long time, we've used a lot of technology in teaching veterinary science. Now someone who's trained with us as a veterinary scientist is practicing. They see a dog with a funny paw. They say, gosh, that reminds me of a sick dog I saw before. And they can electronically get the images of that puppy that they treated 10 years before and compare them. Lots of digital resources. I mentioned virtual surgery, but an ability to do virtual scenarios of many types. Entrepreneurial education, very important, identifying, protecting, exploiting IP. Incubators, we have a complete range. We have 2 big science parks. We have incubators. We have been producing about 40 new companies a year. So Edinburgh is comparable on that measure with MIT or Stanford. We're very proud of that. It does require a lot of infrastructure. For me, one of the most interesting things is that the majority of our companies are led by completing international postgraduate students. So that is students who come to us, like the very good students who come from Korea or from Japan. They come to us, they study a technical subject, we help them start developing a company, and then they stay in Scotland with their... And that is one of the reasons why my university has such a good relationship with the Scottish government, because we produce more than 35 new companies every year quite reliably. We're seen as very important for the Scottish economy. Institutional autonomy. When one looks at the modern university, and obviously one mustn't forget the roots that go back more than 800 years, and the commitment to the sense of community, the commitment to academic freedom. But in the 19th century, the German Humboldt model, very important in the way that it professionalized the doctoral degree, which is such an important part of our identity. And then a lot of important development in the United States immediately after the Second World War. Clark Kerr's California Master Plan to show how one can relate colleges to universities that don't award the doctoral degree to leading universities. That has been very, very important. When you look at the World League tables at the moment, the most successful country is undoubtedly the United States. The country that comes second is the United Kingdom. If you ask, as an outside observer, what are the reasons? Well, one is the reason for funding through things like the National Science Foundation, peer-reviewed research with government funding, which one sees in both the United States and the United Kingdom. But another thing is the great institutional autonomy. And I've been involved advising government agencies in the People's Republic of China, in Germany, and in France. And what has struck me is a really clear political commitment to increase the freedom of the universities in those countries so that they can better compete with the universities in the United States and the United Kingdom. And we see that, I know this is happening in other countries, but I have first-hand experience of quite deliberate attempts by the civil servants and the ministers to make the Chinese, German, and French universities more autonomous. In summary, I finish where I started. I think the big driver for change will be digital development over the next 10, 20 years. I don't think the place-based university will go away, but I think the successful place-based university will teach in a hybrid mode, will use an awful lot of technology at its campuses, and will use the technology to reach out through the world. We will also reach out to the world for globalized research targets, and I think the Millennium Development Goals and the way they were adopted by the leading universities of the world, and in the way we've taken on subsequent goals like healthy aging, is a very positive thing. We will see increased internationalization because of the demand and because universities set a premium on it. For the whole of the 20th century, my university took in about 19% from outside the United Kingdom. In the last 12 years, that has moved from 19% to 41% from outside the United Kingdom, and we will see that growing. And the competition will get fiercer, which means that people like us will look even more worried or even more cheerful, depending on which league table has just come out. And people like us will have more and more friends because we will be in multiple partnerships. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, President Shear's presentation from University of Edinburgh. And I was very impressed with his intensive covering 9 issues as a paradigm of your university. And, thank you very much, President. Outstanding presentation to share your university case vividly for new paradigm of future universities. Although each president has his own view, new paradigm for the future would be focused on innovation of research, education, internationalization, and cooperation with industry and the government in the future. So now we have a little bit more than 10 minutes time. So we'd like to have a cross discussion and questions. So already I pick up 2 questions from the audience, or 3 questions, but I'd like to ask one cross discussional point to our president. And the point is, you know, the research and the education is the flip side of a coin in a sense. So that they work together in good harmony, as you already presented in many aspects, in particular at research university. So how can we synthesize this research and education for the future universities paradigm? That's my question. And the other point is the theme of this 2014 Global Forum, as you know, is human resources for trust and integrity. So please discuss on this point also, how the future university can develop human resources for trust and integrity. So you can, you know, talk or discuss freely, either one this point or both point. And please, yes, yeah, anyone you can. Yeah.
So let me start. I'm very glad that you pointed out particularly your first point. In research university, I think one of the most prestigious advantage for students is that they can be taught by excellent researchers. So the problem is in what way, of course, you know, we can encourage or motivate good researchers to have a more, you know, commitment on education. And I think, but naturally, for my experience, good researchers tend to be a good teacher as well. I'm not quite sure why, but you know, usually people think that you know, the good researchers and the good teachers are different, but usually good researchers can be a good teacher. And one thing I believe is, you know, as I told you, good researchers have a, you know, a strong ability to think for themselves. Okay, researchers have a curiosity,
sure, yes.
or, you know, challenging mind. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, the people who have that kind of ability can be able to teach young people with the same kind of, you know, things.
Okay, thank you, President Seike. And okay, President Brown, please respond.
I'd make 2 remarks. First is I think that the natural curiosity of a research scientist and the concept that they know they don't know everything because there are things they're trying to figure out leads to a classroom environment that is pedagogically just more exciting than someone who at the front of the room is constraining the conversation around what they know and what they're transferring to the students. Second point on that is that a lot of education occurs outside the classroom, and the involvement in the research environment for the best students is a huge piece of their education. On this issue of trust and integrity, one of the things I think that is very important is that research universities stay places that, to the most part, are independent of political position. They're places of discussion and sometimes very passionate disagreement, but a place of rational argument and data-driven analysis as well on all sides of social and economic issues. In the universities, I think all of us on this DS spend time trying to position our universities to be what I would say above the fray of the political leanings, to keep that as part of the campus. That's very important for the integrity of the university.
I see, thank you. Yeah, okay, any more respond? Eric, please.
Sure, I would simply add that the ability of the university to provide a safe environment where students can come together, young people, and have their first interaction with people from different cultures, with different expectations, with different cultural norms about what trust and integrity means, and in this relatively low-risk environment can learn is extremely important.
Okay, thank you very much. And we take some questions from the audience also, and also discussion point. So I'd like to ask some of the questions to our president. One is to President Eric Keller, University of Minnesota, and about MOOC, which is included also in your presentation. And the audience asks you, do you think providing MOOC at University of Minnesota, and then how can we cover the cost of university operation of the MOOC system? That's the one. The other one is how MOOC education would contribute to globalization of University of Minnesota.
Well, I think the business model for MOOCs is a challenge for lots of places. We want to be right at the front edge, but not the bleeding edge of the conversation around MOOCs. So we offer half a dozen or so. I think the largest enrollment we have had is about 50,000. But we find that the completion rate for the MOOCs is really very low. So I think we're moving through a period of time on the Gardner hype curve where MOOCs will be useful for providing specific information at a specific time for a specific need. So they will augment other more conventional online education. But eventually, I think much of the business model, until you get to the idea of selling certificates or selling the registration list or other ways to monetize this, will be wrapped up in some element of improving the worldwide reputation of the university. And I do think it is a worldwide accessible environment, and the audience probably knows of stories of mathematicians in Mongolia who've been discovered by their ability to access MOOCs. And that's not to be dismissed. It's important. They are here to stay, but I don't think they're going to be the revolutionary game changer that some predicted a couple of years ago.
Also, in your presentation, you mentioned about flip teaching in the class. Can you explain very briefly about that, which you introduced your university?
Sure. So I think all of us have had flipped classroom, and this simply means that the instructor, rather than standing in front of a class and lecturing, is walking around groups of students who are working together and as a coach and as an advisor rather than a lecturer.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question from the audience is to President Robert Brown. And yes, about research-oriented university. To become a research-oriented university, university is very struggling. So how can it struggling to become a research-oriented university? So that's the question. And also related to research university, how balancing between undergraduate graduate student ratio.
The two questions are very interesting. The first, there's not a simple answer. To become a high-quality research university, you have to set up the expectations and resources for your faculty to compete on whatever the funding landscape you compete with the very best faculty available. You will not become a premier research university unless you have competitive faculty and researchers in the areas that you're focused in. And that means you have to set up both the recruitment and the retention systems, you have to have the infrastructure, and finally, and this is the ugly part, you have to have a way of gleaning, moving out the faculty who don't meet your expectations. You cannot dilute your faculty with non-performing faculty. And we're a university that's very balanced between undergraduate and graduate education, either if you look at it between numbers of students and also from a revenue perspective. You can be a high-quality research university and make the commitment not to be a research institution across every field. I mean, and I think more and more in the world, what you're going to see is universities making very strategic allocations to compete in specific and related areas, very much like we heard at the CEO's forum before lunch, what corporations do.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you very much about research orientation, university perspective. Okay, Seike, please.
I think in a research university, even undergraduate students should be given the opportunity to research.
Experiences. Yes, yes, I agree there. And also, Timothy O'Shea, it's, you already presented 9 issues, and what is your best recommended paradigm from University Edinburgh to Korean University in relation with your 9 issues or anything else?
That's a good question, and the answer, I think, has to inevitably be very disappointing. I don't think for a university of any scale you could say we'll just do the technology, or we'll just do new modes of delivery, or we'll just do entrepreneurial education, or we'll just be international. My own view is of the 9 issues I gave under that, in that slightly scary list. Any serious university has to address all 9 of them because they all relate to how you teach, how you research, how you engage with the commercial world, and how you develop forwards. So that means that for the people running universities, that's hard work. But these are things that are changing, that are demanding, and that represent either threats or opportunities. And I think they all have to be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. Already our time is ran out, and I very appreciate for 4 prestigious universities present. Maybe as far as I know, this is a very special case to invite 3 or 4 more prestigious university present to present in one session in Korea so far. So in that sense, today we have a very prestigious presentation, and thank you very much for your inspiring, creative, and also very unique contents of your presentation. And today we share how can we become or how can we pursue new paradigm for future university in Korea as well as global universities. So for future prosperity. So, and also we'd like to share together with our audience such a paradigm. So thank you very much for joining this afternoon plenary session. Thank you very much.
네, 여러분 큰 박수 보내주시기 바랍니다.